Hello, everybody. Welcome to AZ Security. And for today, we have a new topic and we're going to talk about conditional access. My name is Ewelina Paczkowska. I'm a cloud architect. And for today, I have asked Ewelina to be a special guest. Ewelina, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks very much for having me on this podcast, Dinand.
You're
My
welcome.
name is Ewelina Paczkowska. I am a solution architect at Threatscape, where I mostly work with Microsoft security and compliance solutions. So, implementing anything to do with Microsoft Purview. But for this podcast specifically, it's all around Microsoft Entra and conditional access, to be very specific. I am also a co-organizer of Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance User Group, where we meet up online on the last Wednesday of every month. So we provide a free platform for anyone to join us. We usually have at least two sessions around security or compliance. And then there are also some really cool prizes to win during each one of the sessions as well. And for those of you who might follow me already on social media platforms, I am also the creator of Wellcast World, where I share some of my insights.
Wow, that's quite a lot of activities there. Awesome. Prizes. That's something I can also introduce, but maybe for later. Hey, awesome to have you here on the show. I've seen you in a lot of activities on LinkedIn already, especially in the security scene. I can't wait to invite you again for Purview, but maybe we can talk about it later on. But for now, conditional access. For the viewers who are not familiar yet with conditional access, can you explain it in a few sentences what it is?
Sure. Yeah. I do have some slides that I just want to share with our audience as well. I don't know
Oh,
about you, but I do have a photographic memory. So I feel like a lot of people out there would also benefit from having some visuals in front of them so they can easily digest that information. So just bear with me for 1 second. I'll share screen here. So
yes.
Microsoft Entra ID has this functionality called conditional access, and I'm sure a lot of people are aware of it already. But if you're not, conditional access is this feature that applies different authentication and authorization rules based on factors such as a user's identity, device, location, and other context signals. So it dictates when someone is logging in whether their device is the one that was corporate issued, whether they have the required multi-factor authentication method set up, and so on. And then based on the different signals that this engine receives, it then makes a decision whether someone is allowed to sign in or not. So for those of you who are not sure about the licensing requirements when it comes to conditional access, you do need to have at least Microsoft Entra ID Premium P1 license that is actually included in Business Premium. For those risk-based policies that requires Entra ID P2 or above. So if you think about any sign-in risk policies, any user risk policies, you do need to have the P2 license. And it's very crucial that I mention this because I still see a lot of organizations out there. You do need that license for each one of the users that benefits from conditional access. So it's not enough to have just one license per tenancy. Each one of the users that will be benefiting from getting those authorizations within conditional access, they need to have that license assigned to them. So some of the practical use cases of conditional access might include enforcing multi-factor authentication for your users. So it's important to remember that just because someone has got a multi-factor authentication enabled on their account does not mean that they will be forced to authenticate with MFA upon their sign-in. You can also require compliant or managed devices before someone can access sensitive applications. You can control the sign-in frequency for your users or your guests as well. You can, for example, block access from high-risk or untrusted locations. So for example, you might have your offices within the European Union. In that case, you might just decide that you're going to block all the locations outside of the European Union, while allowing your office IP addresses and those specific countries in which you've got your offices or your headquarters. Apart from that, obviously, in this day and age, we still kind of have to allow BYOD. So with conditional access, you can allow BYOD, but maybe limit that experience. So instead of allowing users to use desktop applications on unmanaged devices, you can then decide that they can actually sign in from those unmanaged devices, but you're going to restrict their access to browser only. And then apart from that, there are other functionalities as well that conditional access helps you achieve as well, such as protecting your privilege roles, using stronger authentication methods such as FIDO2 keys for maybe your administrators or your VIP users like your executive team who are most likely to get spoofed or phished. You can also require terms of use for any external users or unmanaged devices. And then last but not least, conditional access is really good when it comes to mitigation of token theft or any adversary in the middle attacks. So you can use continuous access evaluation in combination of phishing resistant authentication as well.
Yeah, I really like the last one.
That's for sure. And I think it's becoming more and more prevalent as those attackers, they have more and more sophisticated ways of phishing people and compromising users and identities and so on. So it's definitely something that a lot of organizations should be looking into right now. So a lot of people always ask me, what is so great about conditional access? Why is it so important in this day and age? So what's really great about Entra ID conditional access is the fact that conditional access is this policy engine that gives you a lot of control because it controls anything that is sort of happening within the Microsoft 365 or the Azure ecosystem. If you do conditional access well, so if you've got this really robust conditional access architecture, it helps you secure your environment and it can help you secure your environment quite well. There are also some really great tools that you can utilize where you can test your policies before you go into a full enforcement mode. And I'm going to show you those different tools in just a second when we jump into the portal so I can actually demonstrate what is possible within conditional access. But these include, but are of course not limited to the what if functionality, report only mode, policy impact and insights and reporting if you do wish to integrate it with log analytics as well. On the other hand, though, it's not all that great and it won't kind of save you in emergency situations because what's really risky about conditional access is the fact that because it's so powerful, because it gives you a lot of control, if you misconfigure something within conditional access, you are at that risk of locking yourself out of your tenancy. So this would also affect any administrator that you might have within your organization. So it's really, really important that you plan all your conditional access policies and you test them before you enforce them. And then for those of you that utilize a persona-based approach within conditional access, or you do the conditional access for zero trust framework, where you follow that principle that never trust, always verify, there is a policy limit. So at the moment, it's 195 policy limit that is in place. So if you're splitting different policies when it comes to allowing you a certain level of granularity, that is something that you should just keep in mind. So what's also really important to note when it comes to conditional access is the fact that it's a post-authentication capability that protects token issuance, right? So it's not going to be there to protect that initial authentication of password sign-ins, but you can definitely use it and require some additional checks based on the MFA, device, network, or risk requirements or session policies. And this is really, really key because we see more of this stuff happening where attackers now have the ability to downgrade the authentication method. So if someone, for example, is using SMS as their MFA, but maybe they also have passkeys enabled, when they sign in and they, let's say, compromise the user's password, instead of just being prompted for the passkey, they do have an option to go and require a different method of authentication. So instead of kind of defaulting to the passkey authentication, which is phish resistant, they can downgrade that authentication method to SMS, which is a very weak form of authentication. And this is something that is becoming more and more popular as well. And I suppose the lessons learned, and something that I always tell my clients or tell my audience when I do blog about conditional access or just the zero trust framework as well, is that conditional access is only a small kind of fraction of the bigger picture with an Entra ID, right? And it integrates with a lot of different solutions, but there are also a lot of different functionalities within conditional access. So when people think conditional access, they usually just default to going into the policy blade just to see what policies they have deployed, but there's so much to it, right? But the biggest lesson, I suppose, is having 2 emergency access, or what we call a break glass accounts in place as well, so that you do not get locked out of your tenancy if you do happen to accidentally misconfigure any conditional access policy that you might have enforced. So the recent recommendation from Microsoft regarding those emergency access accounts is to make sure that they are secured by phish resistant authentication. So ideally, you would have at least 2 physical FIDO2 keys per each one of the accounts, obviously stored in separate locations so different people can access them. And always, always, always keep your emergency access accounts exempt from necessary policies. And when I mention necessary policies, I don't mean excluded from the MFA enforcement, because this is definitely something that needs to be also enforced for your break glass accounts. But when it comes to maybe the risk-based policies that you might be pushing out to the rest of the users, this is something that you definitely shouldn't be including your break glass accounts in. It's also really crucial to make sure that you test those break glass accounts periodically as well, just to make sure that you can still get in, and monitor the sign into those accounts as well, so that it flags you and it sends you a notification when someone is trying to sign into those accounts as well. And then I think, apart from the break glass account stuff, the biggest kind of lesson learned from the trenches, as I said, because I do a lot of stuff around conditional access as part of my job, is to make sure that you test your policies before you go and enforce them. So the best thing you can do is just put them into a report only mode first.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
cool.
I really like those best practices. A lot of them are just popping up like, oh yeah, that's true. That we also did when we set it up. It's good to see them back again. So thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So again, I don't really like showing too many slides. So I do have a demo here where I just want to show you guys some policies that I have in place. And I'll just navigate back to the home page so I can show you guys how you can navigate through the Entra portal. I'll just make it a little bit bigger here. So once you navigate to the Entra portal or the Azure portal, even though I think it's recommended now that everyone gets redirected to the Entra portal, because at some stage the Azure portal will probably get deprecated. So it's good to get into this sort of a practice of trying to navigate your way through these different blades here. So within the Entra ID section, if we go over to the conditional access blade, and I'm just going to hide this menu on the left. And then if we jump into policies, this is just my demonstration tenant. But you can see that I've got 63 different policies in place, and you will notice that all of them follow a specific naming convention, maybe apart from a couple of them that I will probably put in to do some testing, but you kind of get the idea. There are naming conventions, there are numbering on those policies. So the goal here is that just by looking at a policy, I know exactly what it's doing without even me having to go and look at the configuration. So just make it a little bit bigger for a second. So if I even click into one of those policies, I just want to talk you through the naming conventions that I'm utilizing in here. So I follow conditional access for a zero trust framework, originally introduced by Klaus Jespersen, a former Microsoft employee. Now I believe he's retired. And he came up with this specific naming conventions for conditional access, and he came up with the idea of persona-based conditional access approach as well. So it means that when you look at the users within your organization, you kind of divide them into different user groups. So for example, you might have your administrators, maybe you might have your internal users, maybe you might have your guests, your emergency access, your service accounts, that type of stuff. And each one of the personas would have a different set of conditions and actions available to them, or different types of requirements for them to be able to access your sensitive applications and so on. And that's why you would kind of divide them, and that's why you would have that kind of relatively high number of policies in your place. But of course, you don't need to use the persona-based approach if you don't want to, but I just want to talk you through the naming conventions that we've got here specifically. So naming conventions obviously help you just by looking at the name of the policy to know exactly what they're doing. So in this specific case, what I'm doing is I have a policy number here. So again, maybe my global policies would be between number 000 and maybe 100, and then from 100 maybe I've got my internals or administrators persona and so on. But they would all follow a specific naming conventions. So the number is then followed by the name of my persona. So in this case, it's a global policy because I'm enforcing multi-factor authentication for all of my users. So then I specify exactly who's within the scope of my users. So you don't really need to do it if you've got a persona in front here, but in case you've got any exceptions, it might be beneficial to have that within the description as well and within the policy name. And then I follow that with what applications are in the scope of this specific policy, and then what exactly is that policy doing. So I can now see that this policy is enforced in modern MFA, and I'll come back to that in a second. It's enforced in modern MFA across all of my users and all of my applications. So this follows that zero trust approach where I have no exclusions, and instead of targeting specific applications, I just target them all. So if we look at the name of the policy, again, this is what you can see here at the top. When we look at the users, we can see that all my users are included and there are no exclusions in here. When it comes to my target resources, all the applications are within the scope. So it's all resources, formerly all cloud applications. And again, no exclusions. I don't have any other conditions in here because again, this specific policy is just enforced in modern MFA. So I try not to combine different conditions or session policies with grant controls. That's why I keep them separate because again, I follow that persona-based approach and I like to have a lot of granularity. So if I do need to exclude someone or if I do need to exclude a specific application or a specific action, I can do it just for a small fraction of users rather than everyone. And then within the grant control, what I'm doing here is require multi-factor authentication. So the first recommendation that I have for you guys here is that instead of using require multi-factor authentication, this policy is saying enforce modern MFA, right? So using require multi-factor authentication grant control essentially accepts any form of multi-factor authentication. So it could be SMS, could be voice call, could be passkey, but it doesn't specifically enforce any specific MFA method. So what you would want to do, and to make sure that this is fully in line with the policy name, we should be swapping that require multi-factor authentication to require authentication strength instead. And if you click here, authentication strengths are these this sort of concept where you've got different groups of multi-factor authentication kind of grouped together. And there are some authentication strengths that come out of the box, but you also have an ability to set up your custom authentication strengths as well. So for example here, if I say modern MFA, well, I do have a custom modern MFA authentication strength, what I will show you in just a second. But when I scroll up to the top, I can see the built-in options here as well, like multi-factor authentication, passwordless MFA, and phishing-resistant MFA as well. So if I come out of this specific policy and show you what those authentication strength looks like and what do they specifically do, as I said, I think the biggest kind of misconception about conditional access for a lot of organizations is that when they think of conditional access, they usually just think of policies, but there's so much more happening in here. So many different functionalities that fully integrate with your policies. You just, in most cases, you just need to set it up or configure first before you can utilize it within your policy. So that applies to your name locations, it applies to your terms of use, authentication context, authentication strengths, and so on. So if I just zoom out for a second, you will see that I've got multiple authentication strengths set up in this specific tenant. Some of them are built in, so we see the options at the bottom of the page that are built in, and then I've got some custom ones in here. If I open up one of the built-in authentication strengths, it shows me what specific authentication methods or what they call authentication flows are accepted. And you can see from this specific list that it's any form of multi-factor authentication. So whether it's safe, whether it's weak, whether it's phish resistant, it's all in here. So we've got Windows Hello for Business, we've got passkeys, well, that's great. We've got a temporary access pass and so on. But then when we scroll down, it's also password plus SMS or password plus voice, which is not as secure as we would want to. So in this specific case, maybe I can say for my VIP users or for my administrators, maybe I just want to go for passwordless MFA or maybe for a very specific authentication flow. So the built-in option for passwordless MFA has got Windows Hello for Business, has got passkeys, certificate-based authentication, and Microsoft Authenticator, so the phone sign-in. Maybe if you want to utilize another method of authentication, then maybe it would be a better idea for you to go and set up a new authentication strength. So make it custom and fully tailor that for your organization. So you kind of get the idea behind it. It gives you a lot of granularity in terms of you can just specify for each one of the personas or each one of the user groups within your organization, what specific authentication method you can set up. And when we think back to what I was presenting when I was showing you guys the slides and the adversary in the middle attacks, or when I was talking about attackers now being able to downgrade authentication methods, well, this is one of the things that you can fully utilize within your policies to kind of help you tackle some of those challenges or make it as hard for those attackers as possible to go and compromise your users. So if you utilize authentication strengths, and what would be even better if you don't allow specific authentication methods within your authentication methods policies within Entra ID, well, then you can fully secure your organization and make it impossible for an attacker to downgrade an authentication method. So you might also see that, again, there are a lot of different policies. So you might be wondering, how can you navigate through them? How can you quickly see what specific condition or what specific application is being utilized within your policies? So apart from just looking up the name, using the search bar in here, you can also apply filters in here as well. So let's say if I wanted to check which policies are utilizing high sign-in risk or user risk, I can just go into condition, and then I can maybe check user risk or sign-in risk options or both of them, hit apply, and that will filter through all of my policies and only show me the ones that I utilize those specific conditions. What I also wanted to show you guys as well are all the functionalities that I covered within my slides as well. So from the reporting perspective, before you go and fully enforce your policies, there are a couple of different ways within conditional access where you can check whether someone would have been blocked if your policy was enforced, or just overall view the policy impact regardless whether a policy is in a report-only mode or whether it's fully enforced. So first, one of the functionalities that I want to cover is what we call what if. So what if applies to your current state of your policies, where let's say you've got a new contractor that you do need to set up within your system, and you need to know what specific conditional access policies will apply to that specific user. Well, in this case, you can just select a user, whether this is a full member user, whether this is a guest or external user or any workload identity. I'm just gonna choose poor Adele. I think she's just a default demo user for any sort of a presentation. So I'm just going to choose her as my example. And then, for example, I can just choose either a cloud application or a user action or authentication context. So in this case, I'm just going to say, okay, I want to check whether Adele will be able to sign into maybe Exchange Online. So if I look for Office 365 Exchange Online as an application, I can then scroll down and use different sign-in conditions. So if I know what type of a device Adele will be coming in, so maybe she's coming in from a Windows device, is she coming in from a desktop application, or is this going to be a browser session? Maybe let's say it's a modern authentication client. I don't need to choose any of these options. So if it's something that is not required within the what if tool, you won't see that asterisk in red beside it. So I can just ignore these, and then I can just go what if. And when it's ready, I can see all the policies that will apply to that specific user. So it lists them all here, lists what is the state of that policy. So is it a report only? Is it on? Is it off? And also, when you go over to the other tab that is called policies that will not apply, you can view all the other policies that are not applying to that user. So it's good for two specific scenarios. One, to find out whether someone will be blocked from signing in. And two, maybe if you're pushing out policies and you want to see whether all the users are within the scope of those policies that are required for them, this is a quick way to verify that everything is as you planned or as you imagined. Another example of what you can do in terms of having the reports ready or viewing policy impact for your policy. So let's say if we look at policy number 11 here, which is blocking unapproved locations, and it's currently in a report only mode. If I wanted to see who would have been blocked if this policy was enforced, what I can use is this view policy impact feature over here. So you can view it for each one of the policies that you've got in place, regardless of the state of that policy and the status associated with it. So if I click into here to view policy impact, I can, of course, change some of the conditions in here and apply some additional filters as well. So let's say if I want to see over the last month whether there were any failures. Well, this specific policy doesn't have any failures, but the failure filter would appear here. I would then be able to see who would have been affected by this specific policy. So maybe if I just choose another one, I'll just try one more time. And let's say maybe unapproved locations, non-office IPs. So let's have a look if that's got any failures. There we go. Okay. Kind of lights up on the graph for us as well. So over here, I should have a filter for failure, report only. So if I uncheck all the other options and just make sure that a failure report only is checked, I see all those spikes on the graph. So they represent the number of times or the number of sign-ins that would have been blocked if this policy was enabled. So if I choose, let's say the 4th of November, and I scroll down, it shows me exactly the types of users that would have been blocked if that policy was enforced. And from here, you've got an option to go and view the sign-in logs and see exactly on which specific basis this user would have been blocked. Another cool feature as well is when you want to integrate conditional access with Log Analytics Workspace, you've got extra features for insights and reporting. So kind of building on that view policy impact per policy, you can come in here once you integrate it with Log Analytics Workspace. And when you scroll down, you've got all these really cool reports and graphs as well, where you can see who would have been impacted by which policy, what is the kind of overview of all the policies per condition. And then, of course, you can apply different filters based on what exactly you're looking for as well. So if I wanted to see, for example, what's the impact of my policy that is blocking out a legacy authentication, I can just choose it from the drop down menu. I can also modify the time range, who's the user, what's the application, and so on. And that will only show me the insights for that specific policy rather than giving me all the insights overall as well. And again, from here, you can then jump into specific sign-in events, user sign-in count, and so on. So a lot of really cool stuff happening within this specific space as well.
Nice.
Cool. Not sure whether you have played around with it just yet, Dinant, but over the last, I think, few weeks, Microsoft has introduced this deleted policies feature. This is currently in preview. So if you happen to delete a policy, whether this is accidentally or whether it was done intentionally, you do have an option to see when it was deleted, who was the user that deleted that. For whatever reason, I've seen it across a couple of different tenants now, and the person who deletes the policies comes up as AD IBETA UX. But when you actually click on that specific actor, it shows you who is the user that actually did the deletion. And from here, you can also have an option to get those policies back if they were accidentally deleted and you didn't mean to delete them. So a lot of good stuff happening within conditional access. There are a lot more conditions and functionalities being added to conditional access in general. I think we just have to wait for Ignite maybe for some really cool announcements. But what I really wanted to show you as well is policy number 26 and 27 as well. So policies number 26 and 27 focus on blocking device code flow or authentication transfer. So if I give you an example, I think we're all familiar now at this stage where, let's say, you're checking into a hotel and you turn on the TV and you're signing in to Netflix because you just want to watch something in the evening or whatever. And instead of asking you for your email and password, you maybe just type in your email address and then you get this code on your screen that you then need to open up your Netflix application on your phone. And then you need to type in that 2-digit code or whatever it might be on your phone to be able to automatically sign in. Well, this is what the authentication transfer kind of looks like, right? So this is something that should be blocked by default, in my personal opinion. And I think in the newer tenants, it is something that is perhaps being blocked by default now. But in your organization, if you don't have those policies in place, I would definitely recommend that you go and put them in place. The only, I suppose, accounts that you do need to be careful with are any meeting rooms where you maybe are using the Teams rooms functionality, because those devices typically do use the device code flow or the authentication transfer. In that case, you can just exclude them from that policy. But of course, you do have that functionality of being able to check the view policy impact feature to see whether they would have been impacted as well. So just to show you where that specific condition is located. So again, in terms of the assignments, your resources and so on, you would kind of go on setting them up as you would usually do for any other policy. And then within conditions, when I click here and I scroll down, I have an option for the authentication flows in here. So if I click here, this specific policy is just for the device code flow. So it's utilizing this specific condition in here. And then obviously the other one for the authentication transfer is utilizing the other condition visible in here. So it's definitely something that you should be blocking to make sure that you're as secure as possible. Awesome. Is there something that you didn't also utilize within conditional access? Do you follow a specific persona or do you follow some other framework?
We are following the same best practices as you mentioned. So amazing,
Awesome.
cool to see it in action again. Amazing demonstration. Also a lot of tips and tricks. Also new for me. I saw a few of them. It's like, oh, cool. It's finally there. So that's a great to see. And you're definitely knowing your stuff. It's like you're doing it for years. It's a great demo, a great explanation, and I want to thank you for that. So
Oh,
thanks.
thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
If I'm new to this topic, and maybe a few viewers are, how do they get started with this technology? Do you have some tips and
Great
tricks there?
question.
Final words.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the best way to learn anything is to just get your hands dirty and just try it in a lab environment. So, I think Microsoft CDX programs still allow you to set up 90-day tenants, or you can just spin up a free Azure tenant as well and just kind of play around. Just make sure that you do it carefully and you don't lock yourself out accidentally. Funny enough, I did open up some Microsoft Learn documentation, so I've got it here within this browser. Microsoft has got a really great documentation around conditional access for anyone that wants to learn that from scratch, or maybe for some more comprehensive scenarios and more comprehensive policies. There are also really cool exams that you guys can take once you're ready and you have that basic knowledge around them. So one of the exams that I can recommend passing is the SC300. So it kind of goes a little bit beyond conditional access, but it gives you that foundational knowledge around Azure and identity and access as well. So Microsoft has got this learning path with 4 modules. Takes roughly just a little bit over 4 hours to go through it, and that will give you that really nice knowledge around the subject. Microsoft also has got Microsoft Applied Skills as well. So when we compare the Microsoft Applied Skills and the official examination, is that with the SC300 exam, you do need to set it in front of a proctor. So the exam takes roughly about, I think, 2 hours, and you do need to book it in advance. Whereas the Microsoft Applied Skills, you can just do it online whenever you get a chance, whenever you go through the content. So at the end of it, you will get a certificate issued by Microsoft, but again, it kind of follows the same learning path or similar. It is very basic compared to what is included within SC300, but it should give you that foundational knowledge. And then I'm going to do a very shameful or shameless plug. I do have entire series on conditional access on my blog. So if you scroll down, so you can find me at wellcastworld.com. I do have a ton of stuff around conditional access for every single thing that you might actually need out of conditional access. So make sure that you go and check it out.
Awesome. Ewelina, I want to thank you very much for once again for everything which you have shown.
And
I
thank you
hope
for having me. It's been a
I hope
pleasure.
you enjoyed as well. And
Yeah,
if you
it's been
like it
fun.
that much, I definitely want to invite you for peer review as well for next time, maybe in the new year,
Sure.
uh,
Yeah.
whenever
Yeah.
you are
We
ready
can
for it.
definitely chat about it. Yeah.
Cool. For
Awesome.
everybody at home, thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening. If you like it, please leave a comment below. And otherwise, I would say have a nice evening, day, or morning. Until next time, take care.